everyone, this is City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. Today I have a video for a punched out Thursday to die for. I'm joining Ronnie Sue, Rebecca, Kathy, Sonia, and Dorothy, and we're all creating videos in which we use our punches and our dies to create a layout. For today's layout, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do with the diamonds, but I knew I wanted to use diamonds. So I used a punch that was in my stash. It's a diamond punch, and it was made by Emagination with an E. And I punched out a whole bunch of this rather small diamond shape. I'm using a Blue Fern Studios collection called Christmas Cheer. I had gotten this collection in a My Creative Scrapbook kit, and I absolutely love these papers. So I had a whole bunch of extras that I purchased in my stash, and I decided that I was going to make a layout with that collection. So I'm taking all of the diamonds and I'm inking the edges with some mowed lawn Distress Oxide. In addition to inking the edges of all of these shapes, I also used my scissors and I distressed the edges as well. That green sheet of paper is an old sheet of paper I know I'm not going to use, so I'm using that as a base for my layout. I'm attaching a number of strips of paper. I absolutely love that pink paper that's in the center, and I love Blue Fern Studios in general. I just really love the way the papers remind me a little bit of basic gray papers. So what I'm doing here is I'm measuring. I want to make sure that all of the strips are straight. I really feel like it's worth taking the time to make sure that they are straight, because there's been times when I've completed a whole layout and then looked and thought, that looks a little crooked, and then it's really hard to straighten it out later on. So in addition to measuring, I also either use a T-square or I have a cutter that has an arm that comes down, and that's another way that I check to make sure that everything's straight. I'll just lower the arm without cutting anything, and I could just double check that everything is aligned correctly. I put a little bit of the mowed lawn that was left on the dauber around the edge of the paper in the center, and now I'm going to be arranging all of those diamonds on the pink paper. I'm going to be putting my photo off to the left, so I don't have to put diamonds on the entire strip of pink paper, but I do end up putting them on the majority of that paper. I'm trying to spread out the different colors. I want to make sure that I don't have all of the red or all of the green or light blue in one place, so I'm not worrying about that too much, but I am making some trades here and there and arranging the colors so that they look like they're spread out well. I wanted those diamonds to pop a little bit more, so I decided to use a darker color to ink the edges. So you saw there that I added some Distress Oxide in the color Pine Needles, and that did help them to pop off the page a little bit more. Now that I'm happy with the arrangement of the diamond shapes, I'm going to attach them down to the pink pattern paper. I try to be very, very careful that the first ones that I put down are properly spaced and exactly where I want them, because then it makes it easier to line up all the rest. And I did find that the diamonds were very easy to line up. So I'm using ATG adhesive and I'm gluing them all down, and I know that since my photo is going off to the left, I don't have to cover that whole area, but I am covering the majority of the area. And then I go in with a few more diamonds because I want to put my photo at an angle, and I don't want any of the space behind the photo to not have diamonds in it. So I add a couple more to the layout. For a little insurance, I added one more row of diamonds on the left-hand side, and as it turns out, 2 out of 3 of them are somewhat visible on the final layout, so I'm glad that I added those. Now I'm going to start working on my photo. You just saw that I wrote the date on the back of the layout. I saw it on the back of the photo, or at least some of it. Some of it got cropped off, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget what year this was taken. I used to always forget to write down the date, and then I would be searching through all of my albums looking for the date for the picture that I had scrapbooked. I have a new system where I use labels, and that has really helped me with making sure that I record the date. But on this particular layout, I hadn't gotten out a label yet, so I was glad that I remembered to put the year on the back of the layout, and then I'll transfer that to a label when I make it in a little bit. The photo was originally 4 by 6 inches, and I cropped it down to a 3.5 by 5.5 inch photo. I mounted it on some white cardstock. Next, I backed the photo with some pattern papers. I had some papers that were already cut down into smaller pieces, so I'm using those instead of cutting into a full 12 by 12 inch sheet, especially since I had quite a few and I had a lot to choose from. And some of the papers I'm cutting into L's. That just helps me to save pieces of paper that I might need on another layout or later on this layout. And I'm using, again, the mowed lawn to ink the edges, and I use my scissors to distress the edges. Right now I'm cutting some small squares of pattern paper, and I'm putting them in 2 of the corners because the way I layered the paper, there was no pattern paper in those 2 corners. So I'm just filling those in. And this is the kind of thing that I try to conserve paper for. You never know what really small piece of paper will make a big difference in your layout, so I just try not to waste paper. I wanted the papers around the photo to look a little bit more distressed than the other papers that I distressed on the layout, so I'm going in with my fingers and I'm bending up the papers in each of those layers of pattern paper. I'm going to place the photo right there on the layout on a slight angle. And before I do that, I wanted to add a piece of pattern paper on the top and on the bottom, just extend those layers a little bit. Just to my eye, it looked like there was something missing. So I just cut a piece of paper, and I'm going to cut another piece of paper and do the same thing on the bottom. And I do the same thing to these new layers that I did to the other layers. I ink them, I distress them with my scissors, and then I bend them up a little with my fingers. I wanted to give the photo a little bit more dimension, and I didn't have any foam handy, so I grabbed some of this chipboard leftovers. It's what's left when you've used up all the chipboard in a chipboard pack, and sometimes I use this in place of foam. It's perfect, just like the foam. It's the perfect height, gives just the right amount of dimension. So now my photo is finally attached down to the layout. I'm adding one of my favorite touches, which is photo corners. So I'm using an EK Success scalloped photo corner punch, and I punch out some red photo corners. I also punch out some strips of paper. I will be getting back to that in a little bit. First, I'm going to be making my title. For the title, I am using a die that I just got from Elizabeth Craft Designs. It says Merry Christmas, and there was an incredible Black Friday sale. They had a whole bunch of really beautiful dies. Many of them were titles, and they were only $1. So this set came with both of the words, Merry and Christmas, and I like the way they're different fonts. I cut out both dies 4 times, 3 times from white cardstock and once from pattern paper. So I am gluing together the 3 white die cuts, and then I will glue the pattern paper die cut on top of it, and this just makes the title look more substantial, almost like chipboard, and I really love doing this. I feel that the title looks really thick and custom, and I was really happy with the results of this. And the word Christmas is not as thin as the word Merry, so that one was a little bit easier to line up. It was a little bit harder to layer up the pieces for the word Merry, but it did turn out fine. So I'm just putting the last layer of glue on top of the Christmas title, and now I'm gluing that pattern paper on top, and I'm going to let that fully dry before I do anything else to it, and then I start working on the word Merry. Once both words were glued together and all the glue was dry, I decided that I wanted them to be a little bit darker. So I'm using some Distress Oxide. I used both Barn Door and Candied Apple to make these look a little bit more red. I really wanted the title to stand out, and of course I wanted to be legible, so I put several coats of Distress Oxide on the title. Later on, I'm going to be doing a little bit more to it, but right now I'm just using the Distress Oxide in these 2 colors of red, and then I also use a little bit of black soot around the edges just to give the title a little bit of variation of color. I never like to have too large of an area of flat color. Then I do the same thing to the word Merry, and then I try the title on the layout. And I'm already kind of thinking that they don't really stand out enough for me. I really wanted the title to be a little bit easier to read, so I'm going to go back to that in a little while. I punched out some borders using some of my older border punches. The one that I'm using right now, it's a Snowflake border punch, and that's by EK Success. I used the same pink paper that I used in the center of the layout to punch that out, and I didn't have quite enough to go all the way across, but I'm going to be able to fix that later. To ink the edges of the Snowflake borders, I just used the dauber that had both of those colors of red of Distress Oxide on it. I just used whatever was left on the dauber, and I inked the edges of those two strips. And then I used a Fiskars punch. It's a holly punch that I just got at a scrapbook weekend, and the person was selling it for, I think it was $2 or $3. I was so excited. So I punched that out of green paper. That's the pattern paper from the Christmas Cheer collection from Blue Fern Studios, and I made a border on the top and the bottom. Now the one on the top has a bit of an irregularity on the right-hand side, and I do have more of that paper, so I thought if I needed to cut a new strip, I would do it, but I felt that that would be a good spot to put an embellishment, so I'm going to leave that as it is. I also have some very thin strips of paper that were left over when I punched out some of the borders. Sometimes there'll be a little thin strip of paper left over, and so I inked the edges of two of those, and I'm going to attach those down over the snowflakes, and then I cut out some thin strips of paper, and I do the same thing in a little bit, and I place those over the holly strips, and I feel like that just gives a finished look to the layout. I like that when the two pieces of paper meet, there's a nice little border, and it's just a very small detail, but it's something that I like to do. And for those very thin strips of paper, I used the red dauber again to ink those. I felt that there was enough of the green inking on the layout. Usually I like to be consistent with the color that I ink everything on the layout with, but for this particular layout, I just felt that mixing them together would be fine. And I was lucky that the strip on the top was just long enough that when the strip disappeared behind the photo and I cut it at that spot, there was just enough of a snowflake to put on the other side of the photo so it looked like the strip went all the way across. I want to make sure that these strips are straight. I had the edge of the papers to help me to guide where to put those very thin strips, but I just want to make sure that they are perfectly straight because I think that'll be really apparent when the layout is done if they're not. This photo is taken of my younger daughter, Julia, and I cannot believe it was 4 years ago in 2017 that this photo was taken. And it was at my sister's house. It was Christmas Eve, and she got a present that she seems really excited about. And I really like this picture, so I thought this would be a perfect picture for this layout. I'm really in the Christmas spirit this year, and I seem to be making all Christmas layouts and getting some of those Christmas photos scrapbooked. And in some cases, it's finally because I'm quite a few years behind with some of my scrapbooking. I was looking through the bag that had all of this pattern paper in it, and there was a cut-apart sheet that I had cut apart way back when, and some of the elements were still sitting in the bag, and one of them was that blue card that you see there on the layout now with the piece of red paper mounted behind it. I was thinking that that would be perfect to put the title on. That way the title would stand out more and instead of it getting lost in that very busy background. There was also a card that had that circle that says December on it and has the December calendar. So I used a punch and I punched that out, and then I inked the edges so that it would stand out a little more. There were also some tags on that cut apart sheet, and those were luckily already cut out for me. I guess I cut them out and then didn't use them. And I'm inking a few other items. There were some sentiments. Most of those sentiments don't end up on the final layout, but one of them does, and I do use the tags on the layout. And for those red photo corners, I didn't just ink the edges with the red ink. I inked the surface as well because I wanted them to look a little bit more red. And now I'm using some of the black soot and I'm inking the edges with the black soot. Before I attach the photo corners down, I decided that I wanted to attach down these very thin strips, one on the bottom on top of the green holly strip, and then of course one on the top underneath it. And the ATG adhesive is actually wider than those little strips, but it wasn't that hard to get the adhesive on there, and it's a really good adhesive. It's very strong. So I'm arranging these sentiments. I have one on top of the photo and then 3 to the right of the photo. And I'm not really sure what I want to do with those, so I attach down the photo corners while I think about that. I like all of those elements that I have on the layout right now, but I feel that the layout looks a little unbalanced. There's a little bit too much going on in that upper right-hand corner. So I punched out another pattern paper circle to go behind the calendar. That is a 2 1/4 inch circle. And just like almost everything else on the page, I'm distressing the edges and then inking the edges. I place my title down on that card, and now I like the way that looks. I feel that that's very easily read. I'm adding some holly leaves to the layout. Even though I'm not done figuring out how I want to arrange everything, I do know that I want to add some holly leaves. So I used a Martha Stewart punch and a McGill punch, and one of them has 2 holly leaves and one of them has 3. And I usually only like the punches that have the lever on them, but the McGill punches, even though they're the kind you have to press down on, they work really well. I really like both of those punches. So I punched some holes in the tags, and I use 2 different types of twine. The one that I'm using now is white, and it has a very thin strand of gold going through it. And then the other one is just, I guess, your typical baker's twine with the red and white stripe. I was going through my Christmas embellishments and I found some poinsettias. These are Paper Studio brand, and you can see that they are a brighter red than the title, and I didn't want the red in the flowers to clash with the red that's in the title. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but I wanted it to be closer. So I took out a gelato. I feel like when I'm looking for a really deep color, that the gelatos work really well. So I use that red gelato, and I feel that the title looks a little brighter now and it matches the poinsettias. Another touch that I added to the title was to add some Bow Bunny glitter paste. The color is called Sugar. It's just a clear glitter paste, and I think that it adds a little bit of sparkle that makes sense for a Christmas layout. So I spread that around, and then once it's dry, all you see is shininess and sparkle. I didn't like the way there was that one green diamond on the left. I could have either taken that one away, or I could have put a few more green diamonds a little bit more visible. So I decided to do that, to reposition some of those green diamonds where you could see them. And it turns out that the one that I put under the photo isn't visible in the end anyway, but that was my thought. I wanted to make sure that there wasn't just one diamond that was visible and it would draw your eye like a magnet. And as it turns out, those poinsettias have some leaves that are very similar in color to those 2 green diamonds. So it turns out there's a lot more green on the page than I realized there was going to be. So I attached down the area that's going to hold the title, and then I attached the tags down as well, but I cut the bottom off of one of the tags because it had some really cute birds on it. And once I was all done making this layout, I fussy cut out those birds and I put them right underneath the title, so you'll be able to see them in the close-ups, but I didn't do that right away because I forgot all about those little birds, but I really wanted to include them, so like I said, you'll see that in the final layout. Now, I knew that I wanted to put something in between those diamonds. I started off by using these large pearls, and I put them wherever the diamonds met or wherever the diamonds met a border. And while I like the idea of having something between the diamonds, I wasn't sure if I really liked those pearls, but I left them where they were. I popped up the title on some foam. I finally went downstairs and got some foam from my scrapbooking room. I'm working on the coffee table right now. and I decided to switch some things around. I moved the sentiment that says "'Tis the season to be jolly" to the upper right-hand corner. I think that that balances out the layout well, and it also covers up that imperfection in that punched out strip. And then I thought that the December calendar looked a little bit better centered on the bottom of the layout. So I used some foam to pop that up, and I put that right in the center. And I think that now the larger elements are spaced a little bit better than they were before. I put a little bit more ink on that circle. I just felt that it needed a little bit more to stand out. And now I'm going to be putting the poinsettias on the layout. So this came in a set of 2. I put one of the branches right over the photo, and then the other one I cut up and put in 2 different places on the layout. I have another pack of these, and I end up bringing in just a couple of flowers for finishing touches. And here's where I'm using the holly leaves. I just use those along with the poinsettia leaves that are already on these sprays, just to help to make them look a little fuller. And then you can see that I add them in a couple of places where I think that a little touch is necessary. And then I put pearls on the 2 bottom photo corners. You can't see the photo corners that are on the top anymore, so I didn't worry about putting pearls on those. And then I removed all of those pearls that I'd put on the layout, and I'm now trying a smaller pearl, and I like that a lot more. I think that I like having something there, but the other pearls were just too large. So I put all of them back again onto a piece of plastic, and I'll use those on another layout. Then to add some finishing touches, I got a few more of those red flowers. I added 2 up on the top where it says "'Tis the season to be jolly," and then I put another one on the other side of the December calendar. And that completes this layout. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. It was very long, and if you're still with me, I really appreciate that. I hope that if you do like it, you'll give it a thumbs up. In the description box, you will find links to the channels of all the other ladies who are part of this collaboration. I hope that you will check out their videos. They are very talented scrapbookers, and they're amazing with using their dies and punches to create beautiful layouts. I hope that everybody has a great day, and I will see you again next Thursday for another Punched Out Thursday to Die For. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.